Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Proline. This is obviously a different version than what you've seen before. Modern technology, and we're trying to keep up with it. We're in different places. Dave is in the office, I'm at home, and Al is in California. And as we progress with this, we'll be able to get 6 people on at one time, and we hope to do that in the near future. So that's going to be kind of a circus to try to coordinate all of that. The advancement of this show, the evolution of this show is going to be a daily, 5-day-a-week show. And you'll be able to tune in each and every day. We'll specify the time. And it'll be probably, uploaded to websites, and you'll be able to get on anytime you want. It'll also be on YouTube and all the websites that we have. So it's going to be something that's I'm really excited about it. Putting it together technically, we're going to have a couple flaws here or there as we figure it all out. But today we're going to start off talking about a big college basketball game, UConn and Texas. UConn just lost the other night by 3 at Notre Dame, which they did cover the spread, and Texas just pounded Arkansas, so that was a pretty easy victory. Dave and Al, UConn seems to be having a lot of trouble down low. They're not getting much production down low, and they're going up against a team that has a lot of power down low. UConn's depending on Kemba Walker. He's a very talented player. He's averaging over 20 points a game, probably about 26 points a game, actually. And they have a great record. It's not bad, 11-2, but Texas sitting at home, probably they're going to be a pretty good-sized favorite, 6 to 8 points maybe. And what do you guys think of this game?
Well, the thing I've watched a lot of Connecticut basketball so far this year, and he's a great player. But I don't know how to put this delicately. He's kind of a ball hog. Once he gets the ball, it basically doesn't go anyplace else. And I think that's been a problem with Connecticut, is they're not getting a lot of offensive flow. It's just one guy, and the other guy's standing around and watching him a little bit. I'll equate this to the Lakers. There are times when the Lakers, because this will be more familiar to everybody, there are times when the Lakers become kind of a bad team because they stand around and watch Kobe and don't get a lot of motion into their offense and don't run it properly. And, Kobe's an awesome player, but if he's doing everything, it impacts the team negatively. I think that's what's happening on obviously a lot lesser level with UConn. Texas is an excellent defensive team. They always are. Rick Barnes is a fabulous defensive basketball coach. And I think he's going to come up with schemes to really create havoc as far as Walker's concerned and not letting him get loose for one-on-one situations, which means Connecticut's going to have some challenges offensively in this game. I think it's going to be a really tough spot for the Huskies, and I'm looking at Texas in this game right now, guys.
Well, I agree with you, Dave. I actually got to see Kemba Walker play out in Maui at the Maui Invitational, and he was tremendous out there, and a lot of the scouts were comparing him to a Tony Parker-like player. He could just get in the lane and break down the defense, and he's going to have a lot of success, down the road in the NBA. I agree with you that you might look at him as a ball hog. I look at it as he's doing this out of necessity because Connecticut really doesn't have anyone but him. So I think out in Maui, his talent surprised a lot of people. Not too many people were expecting that. And I think as the season's going on now, teams are focusing on him, so it's going to get more difficult for him to have the success that he had in those first few games. I agree with you, Dave. I like Texas in this ball game as well. This is a big revenge match for the Longhorns. I don't know if you guys recall, but Texas was ranked number 1 in the country last year, and they went up to Storrs, and Texas actually was already coming off a loss. They lost to Kansas State earlier in that week. Then they go up to Storrs, and they lost the second game in the second week when they were ranked number 1. They were 2-0 the first week that they ascended to the number 1 spot, and then in the second week they went 0-2, and they fell out of the number 1 spot. But that was actually at an interesting time in college basketball. Is all the number 1 teams were failing to cover the spread. It was during a stretch in which the number 1 team in the country failed to cover the spread 7 straight times. But I'm sure Texas really wants to win this game. Big revenge match for Rick Barnes and his men. I'm going to lay the points with the Longhorns.
Let me throw in one thing.
More. I think Texas minus the points in this spot is it's a good matchup for Texas, definitely.
I want to just, I'm blanking on the kid's name. but he played right here in Las Vegas at Findlay Prep and is now in Texas and is putting on some terrific performances. You want to see a great two-way player, and I wish I could remember his name. That happens once in a while. There's 9 million teams out there, and a lot of guys on each team, and I'll just lose a name. But this kid's an absolutely fabulous player. Texas was underrated coming into the season, and they may be a team that makes a lot of noise come March.
They're a very powerful team. I like them a lot in this spot as well. We're going to move on to another college basketball game that's also on Saturday. Vanderbilt at South Carolina. Now, Vanderbilt's going to be the road favorite here, 11-2 on the season. And South Carolina is, I think, 8 or 9-4. I'm not quite sure. They're not covering the spread, though. They've only covered 4 out of the 9 games they've been on the line, where Vanderbilt is 7-2 against the spread. Vanderbilt, though, is coming in, Dave, with a little shorthanded. Unless these players come back, they're banged up.
Yeah, they are. And Vandy is one of those teams that has an enormous home court advantage. Part of it is the configuration of that court. It's just, I'm sure you've seen it. It's a weird basketball court with the benches kind of in.
But this game's at South Carolina, Dave.
But what I'm saying is that I think that's part of what Vandy's edge has been over the years and why they're so tough at home. They go on the road, and that's a different story. I can't buy South Carolina, though. I just don't think they're a very good basketball team. And I think they're going to take their lumps in the SEC this year. That said, though, you're taking your life in your hands with conference road favorites this early because we really don't sometimes you don't get a good handle on teams in the preseason, and things tighten up a lot when they get into the conference. So my initial lean here is South Carolina plus the points, although I doubt very much this is a game I'm going to play, guys, because in having seen the Gamecocks, I just don't think they're a really good basketball team. Vanderbilt actually has exceeded my expectations. So far, I did not think that this would be a vintage Vanderbilt team. They've been better than I thought they would be. But I have a feeling that some of their outstanding preseason games, I think now that conference play is beginning, we might get a little more of a realistic approach on how good they are. And I think they're going to be middle of the pack in the SEC. That's just a hunch on my part. So my lean here is South Carolina, but I can't say that it's strong at all.
Well, I think this game is going to be actually an interesting ball game. South Carolina, as Jim mentioned, they're not covering the spread this season, but they do come into this ball game off a blowout win over South Carolina State. They won that ball game 91-56. On the other hand, the Gamecocks are a terrible 7-17 against the spread as home dogs off a straight-up win. But South Carolina has had success versus Vanderbilt. They're 24-14 against the spread versus the Commodores since 1991. Now, Dave, you mentioned the point that sometimes you don't really want to play on conference road favorites early in the season. But one advantage that South Carolina is going to have in this ball game is that they've got a big rest advantage. They've not played since last Saturday. And if you look at what single-digit conference road favorites with at least 5 days of rest do, there are 200 wins, 125 losses against the spread if they come into that ball game off a straight-up win. So that's one advantage South Carolina has here in that they will be rested and have a lot of time to prepare for South Carolina.
So
I misspoke. Yeah. That's the one that you're right. The one advantage that the Commodores are going to have is that they've got a big advantage in terms of rest. So, I think this is a tough ball game. I don't know if I'm going to play it, but with that rest advantage, I'm not going to go against Vanderbilt here.
Well, I guess go back to this, what I said earlier. What do you think about these players that they've been playing shorthanded? Some of the players are saying it's pretty frustrating. We haven't had a full team in a while. Have you heard anything about these injuries, Dave?
No, that's something we'll have to check the status on game day or the day before. It's one of the reasons you want to try and read local newspapers that give ample coverage for these teams, because sometimes things don't show up in the injury report that will show up in local newspapers, and you can get a little bit of an edge there. I know one thing, Vandy is certainly one of the teams, because it's an outstanding school. They go through a tougher period late in the semester because of exams than some of the other teams do, and sometimes you'll see it impact their play around the holidays, but we'll see if that's a factor here or not. I think it's pretty obvious. I don't have a very strong feel for this game.
You mean this is one of those schools where people actually go to learn?
Vandy's good. That's why they can't compete in football. They really can't. They just don't have the recruitment base that other teams have.
I know this is a very tough school. Their students do very well when they graduate. This is a conference opener, as you talked about it being conference, and it's sometimes very difficult to measure teams when they come out of the preseason because some coaches over schedule and other coaches under schedule. So there's a lot of times you just throw out the numbers and you just have to watch the first couple of games. But I agree that playing home dogs in conference openers, other than the stat that Al brought up, which is actually quite interesting, 200 and 125 is a very compelling number to look at, and Vanderbilt does meet that. So something to watch in this game for sure.
You know,
I want to talk a little bit about pro football.
Well, Jim, I just wanted to throw one quick note in, and that's that I'm not saying dismiss the non-conference part of the schedule, but for a lot of teams, everything changes once conference play begins. We saw a good example of that earlier this week, and I know they only won the game by 3 points because Northwestern hit a real hot run at the end of the game. But Michigan State was a much different team in their conference game against Northwestern than they had been in any of their preseason games. They really amped it up, and you could tell they were taking it a lot more seriously. So that's something to factor into handicapping, guys that are watching and doing your own thing. You got to take everything that happened prior to January 1st with a grain of salt, because especially in the bigger conferences, the BCS conferences, now's when the real season begins, and you may have to adjust your power ratings because they can change in a hurry.
Well, to add to that a little bit, I might say, you got a coach at Michigan State that has a lot of history of great success. So when you combine taking everything with a grain of salt, watch out for the little tricks and maneuvers that the really good head coaches have prepared for us in the conference games. That's why most of the time you want to get your money in on a good coach.
Hey, Al,
you were going to say something, Al?
Oh, I wanted to ask you a question.
I'm sorry?
I wanted to ask you a question. Does a lot of this stuff show up because you have the database that's second to none? Is there a big difference in terms of trends and angles that apply to non-conference play early in the season as opposed to when league play begins in January?
There are. There's one of the things I like to do in non-conference basketball is take home teams off blowout wins. I think the momentum of a big win at home, and you stay at home against a non-conference team, these teams tend to do very well early in the college basketball season. But as you mentioned, Dave, once conference ball starts, you don't get a lot of that same situation because all the teams are gunning after all the other teams, and then I think when conference ball starts, revenge becomes a very big factor in conference ball, where it's not as much as a big factor in non-conference ball. So there's different things that we look for as technical handicappers.
Al, you said something I missed. I was reading some notes. Something off a blowout win?
Well, early in the season, it's very important to look at, how a team is playing. We touched upon Michigan State. Michigan State has not had a good preseason schedule. But then some teams do have good preseason schedules. And one of the things I like to do as a handicapper in non-conference ball early in the year, in November and December, is play on home teams off blowout wins in non-conference games. Those teams are very, very strong in certain situations.
Okay. Now, when you get into the conference play, my history is that, these teams that are scoring a lot of points and sometimes giving up a lot of points, the totals start to go way down. So you start to see a lot more unders, especially in the better conferences. So when you look at, let's say, a 10-point line when the total is, say, 160, and then you look at a 10-point line when the total is, say, 135 or 140, that 10 points is a much bigger percentage of the total number of points projected for that game. Therefore, the underdog has more value because that number is such a big percentage as opposed to when this projected score was in the 160s. This is something I look at. This is pro football time as well. Yeah. We got the playoffs starting, and we have some very interesting situations going on in the NFL right now. We have wild card teams that are actually favored on the road over conference division champions. Now, it's hard to call Seattle a division champion because they have a losing record, but they are. And through the the wisdom of the system, we have a team in the playoffs that has a losing record as a 10 or 11 point underdog to last year's Super Bowl champion. Now, this is not the same Super Bowl champion that we had last year. Their running game is very deficient. I was watching the game last week and actually had a pretty big money line bet on Tampa Bay to win that game. And I was actually thinking that Sean Payton would be wise enough to protect some of his players, especially the fragile ones, knowing that he's going to have to play every game on the road as a wild card team when he had absolutely nothing to play for, unless, in his infinite wisdom, he believed that Carolina could beat Atlanta. In Atlanta, no less.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking to myself, which is why one of the reasons I made the money line bet was, they're not going to play all their players. They're not going to risk all their players, especially the ones that have been banged up like Ivory and Bush. And why keep Breeze in the whole game when he could get hurt very easily, and he has been hurt in the past. When they, could play some backups, protect those guys, give them a little rest, because next week they're going to have to travel somewhere, and every week they're going to have to travel somewhere, should they keep winning. But lo and behold, they're in the fourth quarter, they're still in the game. And I'm doing well. I'm still winning with Tampa, but I'm saying, what the hell are they still have those guys in there for? Sure enough, the Saints lose 3 players in that game. Ivory's now on IR. Bush seems to be healthy. They got away with some, but some more players. I think Colston got hurt. And
Colston's going to play though.
Yeah.
He probably will, but he is hurt. So I'm thinking to myself, what was he thinking about? I mean, maybe you guys can tell me, what is he thinking? You can't figure Carolina's going to beat Atlanta and they're going to win that game and slip into the championship and get the bye week. So what's he trying to prove with that kind of move?
Well, I agree with you, Jim. I think it's always better to be safe than sorry when it comes to the last regular season game, especially in that instance when the risk-reward ratio was off the charts, much more risk and not that much reward at the end of that thing. But in this ballgame, guys, I think it's an interesting play for the over-under. I don't know what you guys are looking at for the side, but, this is a situation where I look at last week, and what jumps out at me is Seattle's game, 16-6 against the Rams, a total of 22 points being scored, which is greater than 20 points away from the posted total on this game. And one of the things I like to do in playoff football, when one of the teams comes into the playoff game after playing a game that's 17 or more points away from the posted total, 17 or more points, should I say, less than the posted total, those games tend to go over the total a great percentage of the time. They're 35-19 against the spread in that situation. I think the knee-jerk reaction for a lot of people after seeing that Seattle-St. Louis game, when the Seahawks played a very low-scoring game that produced only 22 points, a lot of people are going to look at the under here, but that's the wrong move. You really want to look at these games over the total. There's a bounce here, and those teams play in high-scoring games a vast amount of times in the playoffs. Dave, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I tell you what, if this game goes over, that's not very good news for Seattle because their offense is boy. A couple of interesting little angles here. One is that no defending Super Bowl champion has won a playoff game since 2005. But I think
but on the other hand, no defending Super Bowl champions had to play Seattle Seahawks since.
Well, the Seahawks have been playing possum all year long. That's what it is. They knew they could win the division with 7-9. Well, maybe not. The other is that they've got 9 losses, and all 9 losses have been by 15 or more points. They are the worst team ever to make the postseason. And I'm not going to find fault with the system because they've been doing this for a long time, and it's the first time it's ever happened that you've had a team this bad get in. They're going to be out in a hurry. I know the public's going to play New Orleans in this game. I can't disagree with them. That was an awful football game between the Seahawks and Rams and what amounted to the first of this year's playoff games last Sunday night. Just an absolutely horrible game. Both teams were incompetent. And, the one thing I can say is that Sean Payton last year basically rested his regulars down the stretch when the Saints had things well in hand in the NFC, and they lost their last 3 games and then went out and won the Super Bowl. So my thoughts are that he felt that his team, because of all the injuries they've had all year long, needed to play together as a unit in that last game get Pierre Thomas a little busier. I mean, I'm guessing at that. I don't really know what went through his mind. Jim, to address your question as to why he did that, that's the only thing I can think of. They'll get another chance to play together here in what should be an easy victory. I hate going on obvious sides, especially when they're public road favorites. I really don't like doing that at all. But I can't make a case for Seattle in this football game unless they get a turnover early and get ahead 7-0. I think they're going to get blown out in this football game. I just can't see it being a contest. So this is one time where I'm going to line up on the public side. I like the Saints.
Well, these guys did play earlier in the year. I don't know if you remember that, but they played, Seattle went to New Orleans and lost 19-34. In that game, Hasselbeck played. Now he's a definite upgrade from Whitehurst, at least at this stage of Whitehurst's career. Hard to believe he's only thrown like one pass going into last week. He's been in the league 5 years. But, Hasselbeck is definitely an upgrade. He's been to a Super Bowl before. They are playing with a lot of passion. They don't have a lot of talent. They have lost double digits many times this year. They give up tons of points. So this is one of the things I wanted to point out. Up until last week, 8 straight games Seattle had gone over. And the reason they go over is because they give up a ton of points. 38, 34, 40, 42, 34, 41, 33, a ton of points. So like you said, Dave, if this thing goes over, that's not good news for Seattle. The problem is, as we look at this game now, and we're looking at 10.5, 11, I'm going to be shocked if this doesn't go to 13.5.
Yeah.
So we're looking at laying 2 touchdowns on the road in an NFL game against the system of home dogs that have covered 11 of the last 14 times as a home dog. That is really hard to do, especially with a team where Drew Brees is not the Drew Brees of last year, and the reason he's not is because they're not controlling the ball on the ground. Their running game is pathetic. And the guy that was doing the most work and doing it well was Ivory. And now he's on IR because he got hurt last week. And that's where the criticism came from. And I hate to criticize coaches because I don't know football at all compared to them, but I do know gambling. And Al said it best. The risk-reward was horrible. And he was risking all these players for nothing. And now he's going to pay the price because they're going to go up there and they're going to be able to tee off on Brees because they don't have to worry about the running game. That changes the game a lot. And you're looking at a 2-touchdown favorite, probably by game time. Dangerous spot. Al, do you agree with any of that? How do you see that?
Well, but the only thing I would disagree with is I don't think you're going to, I've been wrong many times before. It's, we're just guessing here, but I don't think you're going to see the point spread go up to 13 points. Right now it's split between 10 and 11. It's 10.5 pretty much, and it's just as close to going to 10, as it is to going to 11. So I think you might be surprised to find the point spread remain relatively static, I guess would be the word, and just stay in the 10.5 point range. How
much of a difference would it be to you as a gambler if it was 10.5 or 12.5 or 13?
Well, obviously 11 and 13 are the 2 key numbers there. 12 is kind of a dead number in the NFL. There's always a difference. Every half point means 1.75%. So anytime you play any game, you have to be mindful of the number, and you can't be careless with the numbers. If you like New Orleans in the ball game, no matter who you like in the ball game, you have to worry about the number because each half point is significant in the NFL. Dave?
I'm going to agree with Jim on the movement. Sorry about the chair. It's very noisy. I think on the day of the game, you're going to see a tremendous number of tickets on the New Orleans side, and I think the line will move on game day. I don't think it'll move until then, but I think on game day, you're going to see a jump in this line. Otherwise, the houses are going to be looking at a substantial jeopardy, And that's really not what they're going to have that anyway. But to me, and personally, if I were the odds maker, I would be moving the number up. I want to make the public pay the price to bet the Saints in this game. I mean, of the 4 games this weekend, the Saints are going to draw the most action.
I'm not sure I agree with that at all, because I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of comfort in getting a lot of points. I think it's a fait accompli that New Orleans is going to win the ball game, but I think the fact that the odds makers put it above 10 to begin with, I mean, they could have chose 7.5, but they chose 10.5. I mean, they put it up there to attract money on the home dog, which most people assume is not going to win the game. So I think the number's already inflated. So I
agree with that.
Right. So I think with the number already being at 10.5, it is a playoff game. Teams that win playoff games also tend to cover. I think I just respectfully disagree. I just think that the number's going to stay right in the 10.5 point range. I do not think you're going to see very much movement. I think you're going to have ample support for the home underdog in this ball game.
I agree with both of you, and I'll tell you why. Because you're both making a good argument, and you're both right. The squares are going to bet the favorite. The squares always bet the favorite. The squares bet the favorite and the over all the time. That's normally what they do. Then the sharps come in and look for value. There's no value in the favorite here. The value's with the underdog. Now that doesn't mean every time you bet value you win the money. You don't. But the sharps are going to come in and they're going to take the underdog, and they're waiting for it. I've actually talked to some of the guys that are waiting for it. They're waiting for the line to go up. They believe, as I do, that the public's going to push this thing up. And a lot of people, it's Wednesday today, and a lot of people wait closer to game time to start betting. As a matter of fact, bookmakers don't necessarily deal numbers this early in the week unless you're betting offshore. So there's a lot of places that aren't even open yet.
So remember that in the playoffs, if this was a regular season game, I would completely agree with you. In the playoffs, there are people who haven't made a bet all season that will now be getting involved for the first time. That's just the way it works. And these people are the squarest bettors on earth. They're all going to bet New Orleans. So I think they can move the line comfortably here and continue to get Saints action. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Now, there's one thing, since we're a gambling show, there's an obvious bet here. Now, we're not talking right now about the other 3 games, but there's a bet out there that it's called a teaser. Now, the obvious play here is to bet the Saints at even. Because you can move the line 10 points if you go 10-point teaser and pick 3 teams, which would be the Saints and 2 of the other teams that are playing. Well, you can make your own choices there. And there's also another situation where there's actually a 13-point teaser, but you have to pick 4 teams. But that's, if you're actually out there listening to this and you want to bet the Saints and you like the other games and want to get involved in a combination bet like that, that is one option you have.
And I'd like to make a point, because a lot of people don't understand how to play teasers, Jim. I was watching an ESPN show, and one of their talking heads was talking about gambling, and he was recommending a teaser bet last week on the Atlanta Falcons, who were a 14.5-point favorite over Carolina. And he was recommending a teaser bet to take it from 14.5 down to 8.5. There couldn't be a worse teaser bet in the world. With teasers, first of all, yeah. The problem with the average person out there is they don't understand how to use a teaser. And here are some general rules that you should do for teasers. Number 1, never do a teaser in a college football game. Number 2, when you play teasers in the NFL, you want to do 6-point teasers. And the calculation really is that the 6 points have to work for you as a player. Because if the 6 points aren't working for you, it would behoove you to put those 2 teams in a parlay and get 13 to 5 on your money, then lay $1.10 on the 2 teams, if the 6 points aren't going to do a hill of beans of difference. And when you move the number from 14.5 to 8.5 in the NFL, it's just not doing enough work for you. You have to cross the 3. That is, a game that might be -8, move it to -2. You've now captured the 3, which is the all-important number in pro football betting. So, Jim, I'm not a big fan of 10-point teasers. But in this situation here, if someone does like to play 10-point teasers, and you can move the Saints from 10.5 down to a half point, you're crossing the 3, so it does make some sense, and you can then use it with some of the other games and cross the 3 as well. For example, if you wanted to put it with the Green Bay Packers, instead of getting 2.5, move it from 2.5 to plus 12.5. Or if you like Philadelphia, take it from minus 2.5 to plus 7.5. And now you're not only crossing the plus 3 with Philly, you're now getting the plus 7 as well. So you're right, Jim. Teasers could be a good move in this situation, but a lot of people do not understand teasers at all. And one of the worst things you could do would be take New Orleans as a teaser bet here and move it from 10.5 down to 4.5 as a 6-point teaser. That's an awful bet.
Exactly. And they may not understand teasers, but when they listen to that explanation, they're going to understand a whole lot better. And when you look at these games, these other games, they say you got Philadelphia as a 3-point favorite or 2.5-point favorite. And if you like Green Bay, you're getting 12.5 or 13. Now, in effect, if you really believe, as I do, that the Saints will win the game in Seattle, and I believe that wholeheartedly, I really don't think they match up at all. It's really a question of the number. Then basically you're getting a 2-team teaser, but you have 3 teams in it because the one is a given. So the other ones, just you have to figure out what side of it you like. Now, another thing that I look at, I hate crossing 0 because you actually lose a point when you cross 0. Now, Al's explanation was good because if you cross the 0 and you're crossing over 3.5 or 4, you're actually protecting yourself because, as he put it, you're getting the numbers to start to work for you. But if you take a 6-point favorite and move it across to the other side, you're losing a little bit of value because of the 0, because you're really getting a 9-point teaser. The game's not going to end up in a tie, except 1 out of 1,000 times in the NFL. So I like to look at the underdog or huge favorites like the Saints. So I'd be taking Green Bay plus 12.5 or 13, and like that. But I do understand what you're saying, Al, about getting the numbers to work for you. And this explanation of teasers will help a lot of people out there to get a little bit more involved. Actually, I actually know 2 players that are the biggest players in the world when it comes to sports betting, American sports betting. They are huge teaser players. Huge. They find so much value in doing exactly what I just explained and what Al just explained. And these guys are betting numbers that we would choke on. That's how big they are. But we've got another game coming up. Go ahead, Al.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, teasers are a great bet if you just follow simple rules. Number 1, only do it for pro football. Number 2, capture the 3. And number 3, make sure you like the team at the initial point spread anyway. I mean, if you like the Philadelphia Eagles minus 2.5, do yourself a favor. Don't put Green Bay in a teaser. I mean, put teams that you actually, that you really love at the initial number and capture the 3. Now, if the point spread's 3, let's say in a game, whatever, the Steelers are playing the Ravens, and let's say Pittsburgh's a 3-point Pittsburgh's a 3-point road dog, and you already like Pittsburgh plus 3. Don't take Pittsburgh plus 9. You have to cross the 3. Okay, if you already have Pittsburgh at plus 3, that's good enough. If you like the road dog in the situation. So you have to capture the 3. If you already have it, don't use it as a teaser bet. And if you follow those rules, teasers are a great play.
So in that spot, you're recommending you get more value with a parlay.
Well, right. I mean, again, the 6 points have to work for you. And they really do work for you when you're capturing the 3 in the NFL.
I'll throw one quick thing in, because a lot of people watching this right now, the teaser's not such a good bet, and I'm only saying it from this standpoint. A lot of guys who bet with individual outs in their hometown, they're in ties lose situations, they're laying more big. the teaser becomes a bad bet. There's no such thing as value. So this is only for people who are betting with what I call real bookmakers, as opposed to the guys who are out there robbing you on value.
Yeah. Dave, you make a great point. And for people who don't know what the real odds should be, in a 6-point teaser, you want to lay $1.10 to win $1. 2 teams, 6 points, and ties don't lose. So if you've got those rules, that's the way to play it. And also with parlays, with a 2-team parlay, parlays are never great bets. But if you're going to play parlays, you want to make sure you're at least getting 13-5. Yeah. On a 2-team parlay. You don't want to be getting 5-2 or 12-5. Those odds are definitely rip-off odds. 13-5 odds, of course, they're rip-off odds as well. The true odds are 15-5. But if you're going to play parlays, you want to make sure you get at least 13-5 on a 2-teamer. And it also goes without saying that you never want to play a parlay of teams that are 4-team, 5-team, 6-team, those parlays, the odds generally are huge rip-offs. If you're going to play parlay, 2 teams and 3 teams only, and make sure you're getting good odds. Dave?
That's it. I'm done. I want to talk about the Chiefs and Ravens, because I only have one thing to say about the Chiefs and Ravens, which is that I like this game a lot, and it's going to be a big play in the service, and I'm staying out of the discussion on this one. I think this is a really good play, but I'm not going to say what it is.
So I have to call you after the show to find out what you like?
No, I'll text you, Jim.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is a tough spot. I mean, I don't know how serious to take what Kansas City did in their last game. I know that they were in the playoffs. It's always difficult to judge the motivation of a team once they cross that finish line and say, oh, we took a deep breath. We're in. We're in the playoffs. We know we're going to play in the playoffs. We know we have home field. And now the only difference is I'm going to be either a 3-seed or a 4-seed. So I don't know that that's a lot of motivation. And maybe the coach says, oh, yeah, we want to go out there and do the best we can because if we win and the Colts lose, we move up a spot. Well, first of all, I have to believe that the Colts will lose, and they were 9 or 10-point favorites. So you have to believe that in order to psych yourself up to think, well, there's really something to play for. Some teams it'll work with and some teams it won't. It seems to me like the coaches wanted them to play, but the players didn't get into it because they looked absolutely horrendous. And Matt Castle looked worse than he'd looked in 2 years. They did nothing right, and Oakland demolished them. And not that Oakland's a terrible team, because they're not, but it was embarrassing. So I think if you take that and you can just throw that out, eliminate that from your mind, this Chiefs team is pretty damn good. They were undefeated at home until that game. A great running game, averaging about 160 yards a game, best in the league. And they're playing against the Ravens, who have enormous offensive talent. Enormous offensive. This team offensively looks like they should be maybe next to the Patriots, the best offensive team in football. But they aren't. And they're only averaging like 22 points a game. Something's wrong there. Either it's Joe Flacco, who's not producing, or it's the offensive coordinator that's not calling the right kind of plays. Because when you look at, they added Bolden, and they added Hushmanzada, and they got Mason, they got Todd Heap, and they got Rice at running back. This team should be explosive. They're not. Now, everybody talks about how great their defense is. Well, their defense is old. They're good, but they're old. And there have been times throughout the year when they get down into the fourth quarter that they seem to start to fade. Now, they're supposed to be able to stop the run. Kansas City, that's their strength. So it's really a match between one team's strength and the other team's strength and who's going to win that battle. The home field is big here, but the Ravens are favored. Again, favorites on the road in the playoffs do not do well. They're only covered 3 out of the last 14 times. So I'll throw that at you guys. What do you think?
Well, I guess I'll go first. This to me is the same situation as the game we talked about before with respect to the total. The Baltimore Ravens last week played a ball game that produced 20 points. Final score 13-7. Now the over-under in this ball game, is sitting more than 20 points away from that game. And I think the knee-jerk reaction again for a lot of people is going to be to take this ball game under the total. And that's the wrong move. I'm going to take this ball game over the total, look for a bounce, and look for a lot of points between Baltimore and Kansas City. Dave, what are your thoughts here?
Well, again, I'm going to save this for my service customers, but one piece of information that's already out there, Dwayne Bowe, injured, not going to play, like good for Kansas City. That does impact the team, no question about that, but you have to decide for yourself whether that may be something they can compensate for and do well with, or maybe it's something that's going to cripple them. Again, this is one you're going to have to call the office for.
Well, Dave, this is a situation again. Well, he played last week and got hurt.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, but they kind of wanted to win that game to move up to the number 2 seed and get a week off. Didn't work out for them. Oakland played a hell of a game.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm back at this criticizing the coaches again. Yeah, you wanted to play them. Actually, they were battling with Indianapolis, I believe, for the seeding situation, and you had to believe that Indianapolis would actually lose the game where they're a 10-point favorite. Risk reward. Dwayne Bowe is their best wide receiver, and he is a target, and he's had a tremendous year. 1,162 yards. That could definitely affect not only the total, but who's going to win the game.
Although I do think that I think that the Chiefs did have reason to play last week. I think they thought. I think this is based on kind of what I was reading. They preferred to play the Jets as opposed to the Ravens. And by winning last week, they would have been playing the Jets. Doesn't mean they're going to lose this weekend, though. We'll see what the Ravens do on the road.
Al, anything you want to add to this?
No, I agree with Dave there. I think Indianapolis kind of had the same kind of quandary toward the end of its game last week. Depending on whether or not they were successful against Jacksonville, they could have played the Jets or the Ravens as well, and you had to wonder, were they winning in spite of themselves or not? Did they want to make the field goal or did they not want to make the field goal? But I think, as it turned out, they're playing the Jets, and I guess you'll never know if that's really what Indianapolis wanted or if they would have preferred to have lost that ball game.
Well, following NFL like I do, I definitely feel, and most teams would rather play the Jets than the Ravens. It's the quality of the two teams, the coaching, everything that's gone on in the last couple of years. The Ravens are a stronger team. Now, last week, we'll go back to that. The Colts were battling Jacksonville as far as whether they would win their conference or not. So if they lost and Jacksonville won, that they would have switched. Colts would be
right.
But with the Chiefs, my understanding was if they won and Colts lost, they would change seeding with the Colts. So, but both of those games were blowouts, and the Colts continued to play and they did win. Tough game though. They had a tough game against the Titans. It was not easy, and Kerry Collins played great.
I misspoke before and said Jacksonville. I meant the Titans, but I personally think Indianapolis may have preferred to play the Jets this week.
I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
I'm sure they did. Well, I know I would. But I think it's going to be a great week.
I prefer to face the Panthers.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say I prefer to face the Panthers. Too bad they're not in the playoffs. What a nice team. Hey, you know what? We want to do some best bets on the games we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go first then. Well, here's my best bet of the games we talked about. It's going to be Texas minus the points against Connecticut. I think the Huskies were greatly overrated early, getting as high as number 4 in the nation. I don't think they're anywhere close to that. Probably a borderline top 20 team is as good as they see them. Texas, boy, they put it together early, and they could be a team that you have to watch out for all season long. So Texas minus the points on Saturday. I have a huge weekend, and it's been going really well for me lately. Not only am I picking some good games, I'm also getting some good breaks. You have to have that once in a while. I'm at Bowl Game of the Year on Florida. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and that might be the luckiest big game winner I've ever had. Get a front door pick six cover by the Gators against Penn State. But you know what? When you're going well, those are the things that happen. You start to get the breaks your way. So I'm hot right now, and I love the weekend slate. I got my college basketball game of the month going on Saturday. I'm going to include a Sunday NFL under the hat release, and I'm also going to include the big game between Auburn and Oregon on Monday, and I have a very strong opinion on this game. That's going to be included as well. All three games for just $25. And this won't be available online. This package is exclusively at 1-866-841-1665. That's 1-866-841-1665. I'll give you that again. NFL Under the Hat playoff game, college basketball game of the month on Saturday, plus a very strong play on the big game between Oregon and Auburn to wrap up the college football season. $25, 1-866-841-1665. Al, how about you?
Well, my biggest strip moves have been on fire all season, Dave. And first let's talk about the best bet. Best bet, easy play here, guys, the over in New Orleans, Seattle. And I've got a very tremendous offer for all listeners. We're going to do a Vegas strip move week of service, football and basketball. Our biggest strip moves in football this season, 29-7 against the spread. They've rolled all season long. We've got a very strong Vegas strip move play for the NFL playoffs. Plus, you get college basketball, you get the NBA, you get it all for just $19. Call right now, toll free, 866-896-1628. A week of Vegas strip moves, just $19, 866-896-1628. Jim, what's your best bet here?
My best bet is the Texas Longhorns to beat Connecticut. And I'd like to tell you about what I got going on this week. It's a 5-play weekend at Jim Feist Sports, including top plays in the NFL action, NBA, college hoops. When you make the call to 1-866-841-1655, go 5-0 this weekend for just $15. That's right. Make the call, 1-866-841-1655.
Now, we're going to be doing this every week, the extended version of Proline, just like we did right now. But in the very near future, we're also going to be doing a shorter version each day. Get you up to speed with NBA, college basketball. So make sure you're watching ProLineTV.com. It's going to be a lot of fun. See you later, guys.